Well, Maria, there's a handful of things, and we were in the process of moving out on each and every one of these. First, you have to be honest and call out precisely what it is. For a long time, you said it before, for 50 years, the policy was just engage just a little bit more with the Chinese and their behaviors will change. What did that do? That led to factories closing throughout the Midwest. It led to enormous espionage conducted by the Chinese Communist Party right here in the United States. We took a radically different approach. The whole world needs to take a different approach. You can't treat the Chinese Communist Party as if it's just a nation with slightly different norms. So what did we do? We closed the consulate in Houston where they were conducting espionage. We sanctioned individuals who had denied freedom, the very freedom that was a result of promises that the Chinese had made to the world in Hong Kong. And then we began to defend American property. We shut down certain Chinese technologies here inside the United States. We didn't permit them to transit. We said with respect to the Uyghurs in the West, we're not going to allow products to come in that were made with slave labor. These are the kinds of real actions, productive, outcome-determinative actions the United States took. The world needs to join us. We built an enormous alliance set. We built it with the Indians, the Japanese, the Australians, good partners who understood this threat to their people in addition to the people of the United States. Those are the actions that every administration has a responsibility to take to protect and preserve the American way of life here at home.
And I think that's one of the most important things that you actually did by ensuring that the rest of the world, that our allies around the world, knew what was going on, knew the U.S.'s stance. That's why 30 countries have said they will not use Huawei. That's why others have said they will not, roll over from this behavior. You yourself were sanctioned, and we haven't heard anything out of the Biden administration to push back on the CCP to say you do not sanction a former Secretary of State who did all that he did to help America. I want to ask you about your new foreign policy series at the Nixon Foundation. You, along with Robert O'Brien, to co-chair this new foreign policy series. In particular, what are you going to do as it relates to business? Because the state of the corporate sector is in flux as it relates to China. I think you probably see that. You're seeing a number of financial services companies having gotten licenses to operate in China. They're going into a hostile place where we just saw the jewel of China, Alibaba's founder, Jack Ma, get disappeared for 2 months. And the Journal is reporting about the Ant Group IPO this morning. It was shut down not only because of Jack Ma's comments about the financial services regulatory framework, but also President Xi's rivals apparently potentially benefiting from this deal. So it was more than just Jack Ma's speech, according to the Journal. What do you want to do in these Nixon seminars in terms of speaking to the business community?
Maria, we'll spend a lot of time talking about one of the central challenges that the Chinese Communist Party presents. That's to the workers here in America and what that means about shipping jobs overseas, the theft of intellectual property, and frankly, the Chinese model that has proven so detrimental to the American worker here at home. And so we'll talk about it. We'll frame it as the central idea of America First, which is a conservative, realistic vision for foreign policy. Here are the things that we can do that has a real impact on what we should ask American businesses consider, whether they are investing in China or trading with China or conducting technology research with China. We've got to get it right inside the government. I think you saw this week there was yet another major American institution at MIT who's now been charged with espionage and lying about his connections to the People's Liberation Army and to the Chinese Communist Party. That's outrageous that they're inside our research institutions. And so as part of this seminar, we're going to talk about the things that each of us can do as Americans, as business leaders, that we can do to actually create prosperity here at home and push back against the threat from the Chinese Communist Party abroad.
Yeah, because you've said in the past that one major issue is we've allowed the CCP behind the gates, if you will. In other words, they have been able to either insert people within our important institutions or identify people in terms of our important institutions to work with them, to send data back, to enable them to steal what they do. Is that right? Walk us through specifically what the CCP has been able to do when it comes to things like academia, Hollywood, etc., the business community.
Maria, the scope and scale of the CCP's activity here inside the United States, in everyone's neighborhood, is shocking. Whether that is trying to influence city council members or school board members, or we saw with Congressman Swalwell, members of Congress, business people, when they sidle up to someone at a party or they show up at a PTA meeting, it is not because they think it's a great place to be. It is because they are attempting to influence American policy at every single level throughout the United States. We sounded the alarm. We began to push back against this. We need this administration and leaders all across America in every walk of life to recognize this challenge and to appropriately respond to it.
All right, I want to ask you about the Middle East as well. You did such great work there as well, specifically as it relates to Iran. So the leadership in Tehran is warning that it will tear up a lot of the monitoring of its nuclear activities if sanctions are not dropped. Secretary, what are you expecting out of the Biden administration? Joe Biden has already said he'd like to get the United States back into the Iran nuclear deal. What does that mean for your Abraham Accords, that you were able to normalize relations with Israel by so many major countries in the Middle East?
Well, look, it's well known that the Obama administration had a radically different view of the threat from the Iranian regime than our administration did, and that we took actions that were consistent with protecting America, making sure Iran never got a nuclear weapon, nor even a pathway over some period of time to a nuclear weapon. We did that in multiple ways. We put enormous pressure on the Iranian regime with our sanctions campaign. You know, I remember, Maria, people saying it can't happen if it's America alone. Well, America put sanctions in place, and the cost imposed on the Iranian regime were enormous. Their capacity to underwrite Hezbollah and the Shia militias in Iraq was greatly reduced. Second, we built a coalition. You know, we're often accused of having acted alone and not engaged in the world. I hear this all the time. Nothing could be further from the truth. The work that we did to build out a coalition between Israel and the Gulf States led ultimately to the Abraham Accords, where multiple nations now have recognized Israel as the rightful homeland of the Jewish people and are conducting commerce with them and diplomacy with them and working inside their educational institutions and doing intelligence work together. These are powerful deterrents to threats. To people who are watching your show today in the United States of America, the Iranian regime means harm to the United States. To go back to that deal would be a bad thing. And should the Iranians choose to kick out inspectors, I think the whole world will ultimately see that Iran was never serious about getting rid of their fissile material program or abandoning their hope that one day they might have a nuclear deterrent or the capacity to threaten us with the capacity to actually build out a nuclear deterrent.
I'm just wondering if there's the same support for Israel with this administration, Secretary. I mean, the White House press secretary said that President Biden will call Benjamin Netanyahu soon. So she was trying to downplay concerns about shutting out the leader of Israel. For context, President Trump called Netanyahu 2 days into office. He has not spoken with Netanyahu yet this morning in the Biden administration. Joe Biden has not.
Israel is an important partner, ally, friend, the only democracy inside of the Middle East. You know, we were the first country to join hands with Israel at its inception in the late 1940s. We've been good friends of theirs. They have been enormous supporters of the United States for all of this time. It has historically been, Maria, a bipartisan effort to build out the U.S.-Israel alliance. It's built around good government. It's built around our ideas, central ideas of faith and freedom. I hope that this administration will continue those policies. They've led to real prosperity for each of our two nations.
Yeah, I mean, look, observers believe that it will be Susan Rice who will have a very important role and voice in all of this. Even though she was put in place to run domestic policy, that was a role that she did not have to be confirmed by the Senate. But increasingly, she apparently, I'm being told, is one of the voices on international policy. Your reaction to that and what it means for what we're talking about, China and the Mideast?
American security depends on a good relationship with Israel. America needs to have that relationship.
Secretary, it's good to see you this morning. Come back soon. Thank you, sir. Secretary
Thank you,
Mike
Maria.
Pompeo
I
joining
will.
us
So long.
in
Have a good day.
Washington.